Good evening, YouTube. How you doing? This is Jesse. Just going to give you a little update on my 1991 Bronco that I've been working on. I had the 5.0 5-speed, and I'm currently trying to chase down the last fault on my computer. I'm getting a code 41, which is a lean O2 sensor or lean bank right side. So just to kind of talk a little bit about the car. The car had a replaced motor. It's got a factory rebuild in it. However, that was not put in by me. The person that had put it in, and they had hooked up all the wiring. And since then, I've always had a fault on my computer. Now the vehicle has run very well. It's got a fault, and it's got a couple minor issues when it comes to the drivability of the car. So, I'll give you a little background on this. Obviously, the sensor that was in it is actually sitting right here. This sensor was new. I had given it to the shop to actually put in when they replaced the motor. Now, the old shop did not, however, do anything really to the harness except for maybe this portion right here, which is they cut into it and they just hooked it up because this connector right here is not like the stock connector. So, but what they didn't see was further back, there was another splice connections, or 4 splice connections on the original harness. And I don't believe that they went far enough back, and what happened was there was a mistake made by an earlier technician, and therefore the check engine light was probably on for a long time. It's been on since I've owned the vehicle, and I've been slowly working at getting all the faults knocked out. So in order to get these faults knocked out, I had purchased a schematic. I've gotten the actual manuals, and I have a lot of Ford related tools so I could kind of figure things out on my own and understand how the vehicle is run, how the computer works. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of background. So if you're working on your mid 90s or early 90s or late 80s Ford, this specifically works from, I believe, the 88 or 89 to 91 Ford Bronco. Actually, the heated oxygen sensors started in, I believe, 1990, and they went all the way through 1996. Now, the 1996s, I believe, have 3 oxygen sensors, whereas I believe after, I think it was 1992 or 3, I think they might have went to a 2 oxygen sensors if you had a mass airflow, and you had 1 if you were a speed density 5.0. So, well, let's get down to the wiring here, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what had happened with this vehicle and something for you to check if you're getting one of those blinking lights or you suspect you have a lean side before you start tearing apart the intake manifold. You might want to go take a look at your O2 sensor to make sure that there hasn't been a mistake made on the wiring or there's something wrong with your O2 sensor. So the O2 sensor here was new, so I knew there was an issue, obviously, in the O2 circuit, so I have to figure out what was wrong with it. So with this wiring diagram, I have basically a breakout right here of the computer and all these signals that go out to the oxygen sensor. In this case, in the upper left-hand corner, I have the O2 sensor circuit right here. You have the O2 sensor, and then you have its plug. Now this plug is mated obviously to the sensor, and you have four plugs or 4 areas in which they're plugged to. You can see 89, 57, 298, and 74. Now, 89 and 57 are ground circuits that are fitted to the computer. 74 also comes from the computer, and that's for the O2 sensor input. As you can see down here, I'll verify that with you right here. It says 74 EEC to exhaust gas oxygen sensor. Now that is a dependent input to the computer, so the computer can adjust the fuel injection based off the signals that it's receiving. Now, 298, however, does not go to the computer. This indirectly goes to a 12-volt power supply. And the reason why it does that is because this is the heated circuit for the O2 sensor right here. So it always will have 12 volts because it needs to heat up to properly work. Now, if this is wired incorrectly, it's obviously not going to work properly. You're going to get a signal from the computer, okay, if you have something backwards, and that the grounds are not going to be proper. So you obviously know there's going to be a problem with the actual fuel injection if you have this wired backwards. So let's see what happened with mine. So in this case, I have this oxygen sensor right here that was installed. It was fairly new. The company or the shop that had put this in Obviously, if you look at this connector is not exactly the same as the Ford connector. Now, the Ford connector is a little bit different, and often aftermarket O2 sensors don't exactly match up. It's because they're kind of universal in a sense, and they work on many cars. So what people do is they actually cut this off, right? And then what they do is they'll solder this in, or they'll butt connector it in. I never recommend a butt connector because as time goes on, the butt connectors will corrode, and obviously the signals on these butt connectors will then degrade, or sometimes it corrodes to the point where one of the wires actually falls off. In this case, it didn't happen, but I could see a lot of corrosion after I took this off as a result of the butt connector and maybe some of the moisture that got in it. I always recommend to solder these connections if possible. If you have the space, do the soldering, do it right, do it the first time, and never do it again if you have to do it that way. So in this case, as you can see, I have this connector right here. These are all white wires, so you can understand it's probably fairly easy for this to get messed up or you know, just wrong altogether. In this case, when I move back here, you'll see that this pink wire and this black wire is supposed to represent, if you look into the top part here, you'll see this little kind of tit of a sorts that kind of represents how the actual sensor comes together. And if you look here on the schematic, you'll notice that it has that shape also, so you could reference this to know exactly where the wires are supposed to go on that particular connector. So in this case, we have what's called a purple on the upper left. It's a purple with an orange stripe, and then on the opposite side, which runs on this side right here, there's a black. And these two are actually going to connect right here. 298 is going to connect over here, and then you have 57, which is the ground circuit, is going to connect for the heater. So if I verify this right here, you'll see that on this one right here, you'll have this wire right here actually goes to the corner as it represents in the wiring diagram. And then also on the other side of it, you'll see the black, and the black is represented properly. Now on the insides, you have the orange, okay, and the orange, and then you have a gray light blue. Now the orange would be on the inside, which it is on this right here. If you kind of follow it, it's on the bottom portion. And then the light blue gray would be just to the right of that. And as it says right here, if you have that right there, and it goes here. Now that gray, light blue, and orange is representing the sensor right here, 74, and then you have 89. Okay, those are the wire numbers. Now that is correct. So if I go to my sensor that was in there, you'll see that I had cut off the wires just to verify this. Okay, and this happens to be black, and on the other end there's black. So that looks like it's pretty good because that came from the wiring harness. Now, unfortunately, on the pink wire here, that's supposed to represent the orange and the orange and the black, or the purple, excuse me, the purple with the orange stripe. And as you can see, there's what looks like a light blue with a gray. So we know this is backwards. So this right off the bat tells me that I have a problem with the O2 sensor wiring, and I'm gonna have to fix this, okay? So if I went further down over here on these two right here, you know, based upon this wiring diagram, I should have an orange, and then I should have a gray light blue. But we already know the gray light blue was used. So in a sense, we've had the gray light blue, and then we had the purple with the orange stripe backwards, okay, on this. And if I go over here, I'm seeing that the orange went to orange, okay, but this one was so corroded that it just kind of fell apart on this green that they were using here, and that was really supposed to be the purple and with the orange stripe, but we know that to be wrong. So now we can, with sufficient evidence, say that this oxygen sensor was wired backwards and it wasn't going to properly give a signal to my computer. So I'm off to changing this O2 sensor and the wiring. I'm going to do this properly, and I'll get back to you and show you how it runs. I hope you liked the video. I hope this taught you guys something. Just as a review, we have the O2 sensors. This is 4 wires. Anytime you see a 4-wire sensor, you know it's a heated oxygen sensor. Okay, it takes 2 wires to heat it, and then you have a signal coming from the computer, and then you have a ground. So typically that's what you're going to have on a heated oxygen sensor. The signals, there were 3 signals. those three signals for a 5.0 Bronco or a 5.0 F-150, you have right over here, the 57 is a ground circuit. You have the 74, which was the oxygen sensor circuit. And then you had another ground circuit, which happens to be over here, 89, okay? So that happens to be the other ground circuit. So 298 is fed, okay, from the power, and that comes from fuse 5. If I didn't tell you earlier, fuse 5 is what powers that. But if fuse 5 is bad, you're going to have other issues inside, like your illumination of your lights are not going to work. There's going to be other issues that are going to be created if that fuse is not working. So typically, it's not the fuse's issue. You have some problem with the wiring, or there's a short or something like that. So that was just a little bit of a review of how the wires are connected. Here's a wiring diagram, so you know this is definitely correct. This came from Ford. This is a 1991 Ford schematic. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out with a question, and I'll answer it to the best of my ability. You guys have a great night, and I hope you liked the video. If you did, give me a like. If you have questions, give me the questions. Have a great night.